Imagine a bird sitting comfortably in a nest it has known its entire life. One day, the nest no longer feels comfortable. The branch begins to shake. The wind grows stronger. The bird thinks something is wrong. But what if the shaking is not meant to destroy the bird? What if Allah is teaching it to fly? If lately nothing feels right anymore? If people are leaving, plans are changing, and your heart feels different for reasons you cannot explain, then this message may be for you. Stay until the end, because Allah may be changing your direction before He changes your destination. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt Allah pushing you toward a new chapter you weren't ready for? Why nothing feels right anymore? The sign most people miss. Have you ever reached a point in your life where everything looks the same on the outside, but something feels completely different on the inside? You wake up in the same room. You talk to the same people. You follow the same routine. Yet deep in your heart, something feels off. Things that once made you happy no longer bring the same excitement. Conversations that once felt meaningful now feel empty. Goals you've worked hard to achieve suddenly seem less important than they used to. Many people become afraid when this happens. They think they are losing themselves. They think something is wrong with their life. They think they have become ungrateful. But what if this feeling is not a problem? What if it is a sign? What if Allah is trying to wake you up? One of the signs most people miss is that before Allah changes your direction, He often changes how you feel about your current path. Think about it for a moment. If you were completely comfortable where you are, would you ever move? If you were fully satisfied with everything around you, would you ever seek something greater? Probably not. Human beings naturally stay where they feel comfortable. We become attached to routines, people and places. Even when those things are no longer helping us grow, we hold on to them because they are familiar. But Allah sees what we cannot see. He sees where your current path leads. He sees what is waiting for you in the future. And sometimes, before He opens a new door, He makes the old room feel too small. Suddenly, the things that once satisfied you no longer satisfy you. The distractions that once consumed your attention begin to lose their power. The lifestyle you once chased starts feeling empty. You cannot explain it, but your heart begins searching for something more. Many people mistake this feeling for sadness. In reality, it may be the beginning of spiritual growth. Allah may be teaching your heart that it was never created to be completely fulfilled by this world. This dunya is temporary. No matter how much a person achieves, there will always be a part of the heart that remains restless without Allah. That restlessness is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is an invitation to look beyond what is temporary and focus on what is eternal. This is why some people feel the strongest spiritual changes during seasons of confusion. The things they depended on no longer provide comfort. The things they trusted no longer feel secure. The things they built their identity around begin to shake. And in that moment, they start asking deeper questions. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Where is my life heading? What does Allah want from me? Those questions are powerful because they move a person closer to guidance. Many of the people Allah guided throughout history first experienced a period of discomfort. Their old life stopped making sense before their new life became clear. The transition was uncomfortable. The future was uncertain. But Allah was preparing them for something greater. Maybe that is what is happening to you right now. Maybe the reason nothing feels right anymore is not because your life is falling apart. Maybe it is because Allah is slowly pulling your heart away from things that can never truly satisfy it. Maybe He is teaching you not to depend so heavily on people. Maybe He is teaching you not to build your happiness on temporary things. Maybe He is showing you that your peace cannot come from this world alone. And here is what makes this sign so easy to miss. Most people immediately try to escape the feeling. They distract themselves. They fill every quiet moment with noise. They keep themselves busy so they never have to sit alone with their thoughts. But what if the feeling itself contains a message? What if Allah is using this discomfort to get your attention? What if He is calling you toward a deeper relationship with Him? The truth is that not every uncomfortable season is a bad season. Some seasons feel uncomfortable because growth is taking place. A seed does not become a tree without breaking open first. A caterpillar does not become a butterfly without entering a period of transformation. And a believer does not become stronger without passing through moments that challenge their heart. So, if nothing feels right anymore, do not rush to panic. Do not assume that Allah has abandoned you. Do not assume that your life is broken. Instead, pause and reflect. Ask yourself what Allah might be teaching you through this season. Ask yourself what attachments He may be asking you to release. Ask yourself whether your heart is being called towards something deeper. Because sometimes the strangest feeling in your life becomes the beginning of the greatest change. And what you think is confusion today may actually be the first sign that Allah is preparing to lead you somewhere you never expected. Allah is breaking your attachment to this world. One of the hardest things for the human heart to accept is that many of the things it loves are temporary. We know this truth with our minds, but we often struggle to accept it with our hearts. We become attached to people. We become attached to plans. We become attached to dreams, comfort, routines, success, and the way we imagine our future will unfold. Without realizing it, we begin placing our emotional security in things that were never meant to carry that weight. Then something changes. The person you relied on begins to grow distant. The dream you worked so hard for suddenly falls apart. The opportunity you thought would change your life disappears. The things that once brought excitement no longer make you feel the same. And in those moments, it can feel as if something precious is being taken from you. But what if Allah is not taking something away? What if He is setting you free? Most people do not realize how many invisible chains they carry. Some people are chained to the opinions of others. Some are chained to money. Some are chained to relationships. Some are chained to status and recognition. Some are chained to a future they have imagined so many times that they cannot accept any other possibility. The chain may look different for everyone, but the result is the same. The heart becomes dependent on something other than Allah. And whenever the heart becomes too attached to this world, disappointment eventually follows. Not because Allah wants to hurt us, but because this world was never designed to satisfy us completely. Think about it. How many people finally achieved the thing they spent years chasing, only to discover that the happiness did not last? How many people thought a certain relationship would complete them, only to find themselves still searching for peace? How many people reached success, wealth, or recognition and still felt empty inside? This happens because the soul was created for something greater than temporary satisfaction. The soul was created to know Allah. The soul was created to remember Allah. The soul was created to find peace in Allah. Yet many of us spend years searching for permanent peace in temporary things. We expect people to provide what only Allah can provide. We expect success to provide what only Allah can provide. We expect worldly achievements to fill a space that was designed for our Creator. Then Allah, in His mercy, begins removing the illusion. He allows us to see that what we were depending on is not as stable as we thought. This process is rarely comfortable. In fact, it can be painful because attachments feel safe. Even unhealthy attachments feel safe when they become familiar. When Allah begins loosening those attachments, the heart often resists. We pray for things to return to the way they were. Why try to hold tighter? We try to regain control. We keep looking backward. But Allah may be calling us forward. Sometimes the reason you feel uncomfortable is because your heart is standing between two worlds. Part of you still wants to hold on to old attachments. Another part of you is being pulled toward Allah. That tension creates discomfort. That discomfort creates questions. And those questions often become the beginning of transformation. Many believers go through a season where Allah slowly removes the things they once depended on. At first they feel lost. Then they feel confused. Then they begin to understand. They realize that Allah was not abandoning them. He was teaching them. He was showing them where their true source of strength should come from. Because what happens if your peace depends entirely on another person? The moment that person changes, your peace disappears. What happens if your happiness depends entirely on money? The moment financial difficulty arrives, your happiness disappears. What happens if your confidence depends entirely on success? The moment failure comes, your confidence disappears. Anything that can be taken away cannot be the foundation of your heart. Only Allah remains constant. Only Allah remains when everything else changes. Only Allah remains when people leave. Only Allah remains when plans fail. Only Allah remains when life becomes uncertain. And that is why one of the greatest gifts Allah can give a believer is teaching them to depend on Him more than anything else. The lesson may not feel like a gift at first. It may arrive through disappointment. It may arrive through loss. It may arrive through unanswered questions. It may arrive through a season where nothing seems to make sense. But when the lesson is complete, the believer becomes stronger than before. Not because their circumstances improved, but because their foundation changed. Their trust shifted from creation to the Creator. Their hearts stopped expecting permanent happiness from temporary things. Their soul began finding peace in something that can never be taken away. This is why some of the people closest to Allah often experience periods where worldly attachments are weakened. Allah is preparing them for a deeper level of faith. He is teaching them to stand even when familiar supports disappear. He is teaching them to trust even when they cannot see the entire path. And perhaps this is what is happening in your life right now. Perhaps the reason certain things no longer satisfy you is because Allah is showing you their limitations. Perhaps the reason certain people are fading from your life is because your heart was becoming too dependent on them. Perhaps the reason your old goals no longer excite you is because Allah is awakening you to something greater. Do not misunderstand this lesson. Islam does not teach us to abandon the world completely. We work, we build, we love, we dream, and we pursue success. But we do so while remembering that none of these things are our ultimate destination. Our hearts belong to Allah first. Everything else comes second. And when Allah begins breaking unhealthy attachments, it is not because He wants to leave you empty. It is because He wants to fill that space with something better. He wants to replace fear with trust. He wants to replace dependence on people with dependence on Him. He wants to replace temporary comfort with lasting peace. The process may feel painful, it may feel confusing, it may even feel lonely. But one day you may look back and realize that what felt like loss was actually mercy. What felt like separation was actually protection. And what felt like Allah taking something away was actually Allah bringing your heart back to where it truly belongs. The people and things leaving your life are not leaving by accident. One of the most painful experiences a person can go through is watching something they care about slowly disappear. Sometimes it is a relationship. Sometimes it is a friendship. Sometimes it is an opportunity you worked hard to achieve. Sometimes it is a dream you carried in your heart for years. You never expected it to leave. You never imagined life without it. You thought it would always be there. Then suddenly, things begin to change. People become distant. Conversations become shorter. Connections become weaker. Doors begin to close. Plans begin to fall apart. And no matter how hard you try, you cannot seem to stop it from happening. This is the moment where many people ask the same question. Why is Allah allowing this? The answer is not always easy to understand. But one thing every believer must remember is this: nothing leaves your life without Allah knowing about it. Nothing disappears without His permission. Nothing slips away from you by accident. Allah is the Lord of every moment, every meeting, every goodbye, and every new beginning. What feels random to us is never random to Him. What feels unexpected to us was already known by Him. And what feels like a painful ending may actually be part of a plan that your eyes cannot yet see. Human beings naturally become attached to what is familiar. We hold tightly to people who make us feel comfortable. We hold tightly to routines that make us feel secure. We hold tightly to dreams that give us hope. There is nothing wrong with loving people. There is nothing wrong with having dreams. There is nothing wrong with appreciating blessings. The danger begins when we start believing those things are permanent. The danger begins when our hearts become so attached that we cannot imagine life without them. Because the truth is that every blessing in this world is temporary. Every relationship, every opportunity, every possession, every season of life, everything in this dunya eventually changes. Only Allah remains. And sometimes Allah allows certain things to leave because He knows they can no longer take you where He wants you to go. Think about a traveler carrying a heavy bag on a long journey. At first, the bag may seem useful, but as the road becomes longer, the weight becomes harder to carry. Eventually, the traveler must let go of certain things to continue moving forward. Many people do not realize that some relationships, habits, and attachments become spiritual weight. They keep you connected to an old version of yourself. They keep you attached to a path that Allah is trying to move you away from. They keep you focused on what was instead of what could be. So Allah, in His wisdom, begins creating distance. Not because He wants to punish you, not because He wants you to suffer, but because He sees a future you cannot see. He sees where certain roads lead. He sees what certain people would eventually do to your heart. He sees the distractions that would pull you away from Him. He sees the opportunities that would look good on the surface, but quietly damage your soul. And because His knowledge is perfect, He sometimes removes things before they remove you from your purpose. This is why many believers later look back on painful losses and realize they were actually blessings in disguise. At the time they cried, at the time they felt abandoned, at the time they begged Allah to restore what had been taken. But years later they finally understood. They understood that the relationship would have hurt them. They understood that the opportunity would have distracted them. They understood that the path they wanted so badly was never meant for them. And suddenly, what once looked like rejection started looking like protection. One of the greatest acts of faith is trusting Allah when you do not understand why something is leaving. Anyone can trust Allah when life makes sense. Anyone can trust Allah when every prayer is answered exactly the way they expected. But true faith appears when things become unclear. True faith appears when doors close. True faith appears when people walk away. True faith appears when life takes a direction you never planned. That is when the believer says, Allah knows what I do not know. Those simple words carry immense power, because the reality is that our vision is limited. We see today, Allah sees forever. We see one chapter. Allah sees the entire story. We see what we are losing. Allah sees what He is preparing. And sometimes the thing leaving your life is making room for something greater. But because the new blessing has not arrived yet, all you can focus on is the empty space. This is where many people become stuck. They spend years mourning what left, years replaying old memories, years wishing they could return to a chapter that Allah already closed. Meanwhile, Allah is calling them forward. Imagine standing in front of a door that has been permanently locked. You can spend years banging on that door, begging for it to open again. Or you can trust that Allah closed it because another door exists somewhere ahead. Many people never discover the next door because they refuse to leave the old one. They become prisoners of what was. But Allah wants believers to become people of trust. People who continue walking even when they do not understand. People who believe that if Allah removed something, He did so with wisdom. This does not mean you will not feel pain. Even the strongest believers feel sadness. Even the prophets experienced grief. Islam does not teach us to pretend that loss does not hurt. Islam teaches us to carry our pain while still trusting Allah. It teaches us to cry without losing hope. It teaches us to grieve without losing faith. It teaches us to accept that some endings are necessary for new beginnings to appear. Perhaps there is someone watching right now who cannot stop thinking about what left. A person, a relationship, a dream, an opportunity, a chapter of life that seems impossible to move beyond. If that is you, remember this. Allah is not limited by what you lost. The one who gave you that blessing is capable of giving you another. The one who opened doors before can open new ones again. The one who guided you through previous storms can guide you through this one too. Do not measure your future by what is left. Measure it by the power of the one who remains. Because when Allah removes something from your life, the story is not over. In many cases, it is only beginning. And what feels like an ending today may one day become the reason you thank Allah the most. For the people and things leaving your life are not leaving by accident. They are leaving under the command of the one who knows exactly where He is leading you next. The uncomfortable season. Before a divine transformation, there is a season that almost every believer experiences at some point in life. It is a season that feels confusing, uncomfortable, and sometimes even frightening. Nothing seems completely wrong, yet nothing feels completely right. You feel as though you are standing between two versions of your life. The old version is slowly fading away, but the new version has not fully appeared. You find yourself in a strange place where answers feel distant, clarity feels limited, and certainty feels harder to find. Many people become discouraged during this season. They think they have lost their way. They think Allah has stopped guiding them. They think their prayers are not being heard. But what if this season is not a sign that something is wrong? What if it is actually a sign that something extraordinary is taking place beneath the surface? One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that transformation feels comfortable. In reality, transformation often feels exactly the opposite. Growth stretches you. Growth challenges you. Growth forces you to leave behind things that once felt safe. And whenever you leave what is familiar, discomfort naturally follows. Think about every major change in life. Before a person becomes stronger, they must face challenges. Before a student graduates, they must pass difficult exams. Before a seed becomes a tree, it must first split open beneath the darkness of the soil. From the outside, it looks like destruction. But in reality, it is becoming something greater than it was before. The same thing often happens in the life of a believer. Before Allah elevates you, He may allow you to pass through a season where everything feels uncertain. Not because He wants to harm you, but because He is preparing you. Preparation often happens in places that feel uncomfortable. Many people ask Allah for a better future. Few people realize that a better future often requires becoming a different person. And becoming a different person is rarely easy. You cannot carry every old habit into a new chapter. You cannot bring every unhealthy attachment into the future Allah is preparing for you. You cannot remain the same while expecting your life to completely change. Something must be refined. Something must be strengthened. Something must be transformed. That process is what creates the uncomfortable season. During this period, Allah may allow you to see things differently. The people you once admired may no longer influence you the same way. The goals you once obsessed over may start feeling less important. The distractions that once occupied your mind may begin losing their attraction. At first, this can feel unsettling. You may wonder why you are changing. You may wonder why old things no longer satisfy you. You may wonder why your heart seems to be moving in a different direction. What many people fail to realize is that Allah often changes your heart before He changes your circumstances. Long before the visible transformation appears, an invisible transformation begins inside. Your priorities start changing. Your desires start changing. Your understanding starts changing. Your relationship with Allah starts deepening. And while nobody else can see it yet, a powerful process is already underway. This is why some of the most important moments in your life may not look impressive from the outside. Sometimes the greatest work Allah is doing happens in private. It happens during the nights when nobody knows what you are struggling with. It happens during the prayers nobody sees. It happens during the tears you wipe away alone. It happens during the moments when you choose faith despite confusion. These moments may seem small, but they are often building the foundation for the next chapter of your life. The uncomfortable season also reveals something important about the condition of your heart. It exposes where your trust truly lies. When life feels stable, it is easy to say you trust Allah. When things are going according to plan, faith feels simple. But what happens when the plan changes? What happens when the future becomes unclear? What happens when Allah asks you to walk forward without seeing the entire road? That is where trust becomes real. That is where faith becomes more than words. Anyone can praise Allah when life is easy. The believer learns to trust Him even when life becomes uncertain. The believer learns to trust that Allah is working even when they cannot see the results. This lesson appears again and again throughout Islamic history. The prophets were not immediately taken from hardship to victory. There was often a period in between, a period where they had to trust Allah before they could see what He was preparing, a period where they had to continue moving forward despite uncertainty, a period where their faith was strengthened through difficulty. And that same pattern continues today. Many believers are eager for the blessing, but they become frustrated with the preparation. They want the destination, but they do not want the journey. Yet Allah knows that without the journey, the destination would not have the same value. Without preparation, many blessings would become burdens. Without growth, many opportunities would be wasted. Without wisdom, many victories would become tests. That is why Allah prepares people before He elevates them. He strengthens them before He entrusts them with more. He teaches them before He opens greater doors. And that preparation often happens during seasons that feel uncomfortable. Perhaps you are in that season right now. Perhaps you feel disconnected from the life you once knew. Perhaps you feel uncertain about where things are heading. Perhaps you keep asking Allah for answers, but have not received the clarity you expected. If so, remember this. Not every uncomfortable season is a punishment. Some uncomfortable seasons are evidence that Allah is doing something beautiful behind the scenes. Just because you cannot see the transformation does not mean it is not happening. A flower does not bloom the moment it is planted. A tree does not grow overnight. And a believer does not become who Allah intends them to be in a single day. Transformation takes time. Growth takes patience. Preparation takes trust. What feels slow to you may be perfectly timed by Allah. What feels confusing to you may be part of a plan far greater than your understanding. And what feels like a delay may actually be divine preparation for something that would not be possible if it arrived too soon. So do not rush this season. Do not despise this season. Do not assume that because it feels uncomfortable, it has no purpose. Some of the greatest blessings in your future may be connected to what Allah is teaching you right now. One day, you may look back on this chapter and realize that the season you wanted to escape was actually the season that changed everything. Because before Allah transforms your circumstances, He often transforms your heart. Before He opens new doors, He prepares you to walk through them. And before a divine transformation becomes visible to the world, it usually begins in the hidden places that only Allah can see. When Allah wants you somewhere else, He disturbs your comfort. One of the most misunderstood realities of life is that comfort is not always a sign that you are exactly where Allah wants you to be. Many people believe that if something feels comfortable, it must be right. They assume that if a situation feels familiar and predictable, they should stay there forever. They begin to build their lives around what feels safe rather than around where Allah is leading them. But throughout life, there are moments when Allah wants to take a person somewhere they would never go on their own. And when that happens, He often begins by disturbing their comfort. This is a lesson that many people do not understand until years later. At first, they only notice that something feels different. The excitement they once felt begins to disappear. The satisfaction they once had starts fading. The routine that once brought security now feels empty. The place they once loved no longer feels like home. The path they once felt certain about suddenly becomes filled with questions. Nothing dramatic may have happened on the outside, yet something is changing deep within. And because human beings naturally resist change, they often fight against this feeling. They try to force themselves back into old patterns. They try to recreate the comfort they once had. They try to hold on to a season that Allah is asking them to leave behind. But the harder they hold on, the more uncomfortable they become. Why? Because Allah is gently pushing them toward a different direction. Think about how many people stay in situations long after they have stopped growing. Not because the situation is good for them, not because it is helping their relationship with Allah, but simply because it is familiar. Familiarity can be powerful. People often choose a familiar struggle over an unfamiliar opportunity. They choose a known limitation over an unknown possibility. They choose comfort over growth. But Allah did not create you merely to remain comfortable. He created you to grow. He created you to draw closer to Him. He created you to fulfill a purpose that is greater than temporary comfort. And sometimes the great obstacle to that purpose is not hardship. It is comfort, because comfort can make a person stop moving. Comfort can make a person stop seeking. Comfort can make a person forget that there is more ahead. This is why Allah sometimes allows a holy dissatisfaction to enter your life. A feeling that something is no longer enough. A feeling that you are being called towards something deeper. A feeling that your soul is outgrowing its current environment. At first, this feeling can be confusing. You may wonder why things that once excited you no longer have the same effect. You may wonder why your heart feels restless. You may wonder why you cannot seem to enjoy certain things the way you used to. But what if that restlessness is not a problem? What if it is guidance? What if Allah is using discomfort to move you where comfort never could? Imagine a bird sitting safely inside a nest. The nest protects it. The nest feels familiar. The nest feels secure. But there comes a time when remaining in the nest becomes more dangerous than leaving it. The bird was not created to stay there forever. It was created to fly. If it never leaves, it will never discover what it was truly capable of becoming. Many believers experience a similar moment in their lives. Allah begins showing them that the place where they currently are cannot be their final destination. The habits they have developed are too small for the future He is preparing. The mindset they carry is too limited for the wisdom He wants to give them. The attachments they hold are preventing them from moving forward. So He begins creating discomfort, not because He is angry, not because He is punishing them, but because He loves them enough not to leave them where they are. This is one of the hidden forms of Allah's mercy, yet most people do not recognize it when it arrives. Instead of seeing guidance, they see inconvenience. Instead of seeing growth, they see frustration. Instead of seeing preparation, they see loss. They focus entirely on what feels uncomfortable and miss the greater purpose behind it. The truth is that some of the greatest blessings in your life may begin with discomfort. The new direction may begin with uncertainty. The new chapter may begin with a closed door. The new opportunity may begin with disappointment. The stronger version of yourself may begin with a season where nothing feels stable. Because Allah is often working in ways that do not make immediate sense. Think about the life of Prophet Musa alayhi as-salam. There were moments when the path ahead seemed completely unclear. There were moments when everything familiar disappeared. Yet every step was leading him toward a purpose that Allah had already planned. The same principle applies to many believers today. Sometimes you only understand Allah's wisdom when you look backward. At the moment, all you can see is the discomfort. Years later, you see the direction. You realize that if certain things had not fallen apart, you would never have moved forward. If certain people had stayed, you would never have grown. If certain doors had remained open, you might never have discovered the path Allah truly intended for you. Suddenly, what once felt painful starts making sense. You begin to see that Allah was not taking something away. He was guiding you somewhere better. And perhaps that is what is happening in your life right now. Perhaps the reason you feel restless is because your soul has outgrown a chapter. Perhaps the reason your old routines feel empty is because Allah is calling you toward a deeper purpose. Perhaps the reason nothing feels comfortable anymore is because comfort itself has become the barrier between you and your next stage of growth. If that is the case, do not be afraid. Do not immediately assume that something has gone wrong. Instead, ask yourself a different question. What if Allah is trying to move me? What if this discomfort is actually direction? What if this restlessness is actually guidance? What if the thing I am trying to hold on to is the very thing Allah is asking me to release? These questions can change everything. Because the moment you stop fighting every uncomfortable feeling and start seeking the lesson within it, your perspective begins to shift. You stop seeing yourself as someone whose life is falling apart. You start seeing yourself as someone being guided. You stop focusing only on what is ending. You begin paying attention to what Allah may be preparing, and that changes the entire experience. The discomfort does not disappear overnight. The uncertainty may still remain. The future may still be unclear. But now you understand something important. Allah does not disturb your comfort without a reason. If He is making your current situation feel too small, it may be because He is preparing you for something greater. If He is making old things lose their appeal, it may be because your heart is being redirected. If He is creating restlessness within you, it may be because your soul is hearing a call that your mind has not fully understood yet. And one day, when the new chapter finally becomes clear, you may look back and realize that the discomfort you feared was actually one of the greatest acts of guidance Allah ever gave you. Because when Allah wants you somewhere else, He does not always begin by showing you the destination. Sometimes He begins by making it impossible to stay where you are, the spiritual awakening hidden inside your confusion. There are moments in life when confusion enters your heart without warning. You look around and realize that the things that once made sense no longer seem clear. The direction you thought you were heading suddenly feels uncertain. The plans you carefully built no longer feel as solid as they once did. Even your understanding of yourself begins to change. For many people, this is one of the most uncomfortable experiences they will ever face. Human beings naturally crave certainty. We want clear answers. We want clear directions. We want to know exactly where we are going and exactly how everything will turn out. We want reassurance that our efforts will succeed and that our future will unfold according to our expectations. But life does not always work that way. And when Allah begins leading a person toward a deeper relationship with Him, He sometimes allows them to pass through a season of confusion. At first, that sounds strange. Why would Allah allow confusion if guidance is what we need? Because sometimes confusion is what breaks the illusion that we are in control. Sometimes confusion is what finally causes a person to stop relying completely on themselves and start turning sincerely toward Allah. Think about it. Many people only begin seeking Allah more deeply when life stops making sense. As long as everything is comfortable, predictable, and under control, they remain distracted. They continue moving through life on autopilot. Their prayers become routine. Their connection with Allah becomes shallow. Their focus remains fixed on worldly concerns. But then something happens. A door closes. A relationship changes. A dream falls apart. A situation becomes uncertain. Suddenly, the person who rarely reflected begins asking questions. Suddenly, the person who rarely made sincere dua begins raising their hands more often. Suddenly, the person who rarely thought about their purpose begins searching for answers. What changed? Confusion entered their life. And hidden within that confusion was an invitation to wake up spiritually. One of the greatest misconceptions people have is believing that spiritual awakening always feels peaceful from the beginning. In reality, awakening often starts with discomfort. Before clarity comes, there is questioning. Before understanding comes, there is uncertainty. Before growth comes, there is disruption. Because awakening requires the old way of thinking to be challenged. It requires old assumptions to be broken. It requires old attachments to loosen their grip on the heart. And none of that feels comfortable. Imagine a person sleeping deeply in a dark room. When someone suddenly opens the curtains and sunlight fills the room, the person's first reaction is not comfort. The light feels intense. The eyes struggle to adjust. There is discomfort before clarity. The same thing often happens spiritually. When Allah begins opening your eyes to deeper truths, there is often a period where everything feels unsettled. You begin noticing things you ignored before. You begin questioning things you once accepted without thought. You begin seeing the temporary nature of this world more clearly, and that realization changes you. The things that once consumed your attention start losing their power. The things that once seemed urgent begin feeling less important. You start realizing how much time, energy, and emotion you invested in things that cannot last forever. This realization can be both beautiful and painful. Beautiful because it brings you closer to the truth. Painful because it forces you to confront illusions you once depended on. Many people reach this stage and become afraid. They think something is wrong because they no longer feel the same excitement about the things they used to chase. They wonder why certain conversations feel empty. They wonder why certain goals no longer inspire them. They wonder why they feel disconnected from the version of themselves they used to be. But what if this is not loss? What if this is awakening? What if Allah is opening your eyes to realities your heart could not see before? The truth is that growth often requires outgrowing. You cannot move into a deeper level of understanding while holding on to every old perspective. You cannot develop a stronger relationship with Allah while remaining exactly the same person. Something has to change. And change often feels confusing while it is happening. One reason confusion feels so uncomfortable is because it removes the illusion of certainty. We like feeling in control. We like having answers. We like knowing what comes next. But Allah sometimes allows confusion because He wants us to learn a different kind of certainty. Not certainty in our plans, not certainty in our predictions, but certainty in Him. There is a huge difference. When your confidence is based on your own understanding, every unexpected event can shake you. But when your confidence is based on Allah, you can remain steady even when you do not understand everything. This is one of the greatest spiritual shifts a believer can experience. Instead of saying, "I need to know exactly what is happening," the believer begins saying, "I trust Allah even if I do not understand what is happening." That shift changes everything, because now your peace is no longer dependent on having all the answers. Your peace comes from knowing who holds the answers. And that is a much stronger foundation. Many of the prophets experienced seasons of uncertainty. There were moments when the road ahead was not fully visible. There were moments when they had to continue trusting Allah without knowing every detail of what was coming next. Yet those moments were never meaningless. Those moments strengthened their faith. Those moments deepened their reliance upon Allah. Those moments prepared them for responsibilities they could not yet see. The same may be true for you. Perhaps the confusion you are experiencing right now is not evidence that you are lost. Perhaps it is evidence that you are being guided differently. Perhaps Allah is teaching you lessons that could not be learned through comfort. Perhaps He is drawing you closer through questions that have not yet been answered. Perhaps He is removing false certainties so that you can discover true faith. Because true faith is not believing only when everything makes sense. True faith is trusting Allah when things do not make sense yet. That word "yet" is important, because what feels confusing today may become clear tomorrow. What feels painful today may become understandable years from now. What feels like a setback today may eventually reveal itself as protection. Many believers can look back on difficult chapters and say, "At the time, I did not understand what Allah was doing. Now I see His wisdom." But they only gained that understanding because they kept walking forward. They kept trusting. They kept praying. They kept believing, even when they could not see the full picture. So if you are in a season of confusion right now, do not rush to label it as failure. Do not assume that uncertainty means you are moving in the wrong direction. Do not believe that because you do not have all the answers, Allah has abandoned you. Sometimes confusion is the beginning of awakening. Sometimes uncertainty is the doorway to deeper faith. Sometimes the questions that trouble your heart today are leading you toward truths that will transform your life tomorrow. And sometimes the very season you wish would end is the season Allah is using to bring you closer to Him than you have ever been before. Because hidden inside your confusion may be one of the greatest gifts Allah can give a believer. A spiritual awakening that changes the direction of their entire life. You are not losing yourself. Allah is rebuilding you. One of the most frightening feelings a person can experience is the feeling that they no longer recognize themselves. The things you once enjoyed do not excite you the same way anymore. The goals that once drove you forward no longer seem as important. The version of yourself that felt familiar begins to disappear. And because of that, you start asking difficult questions. What is happening to me? Why do I feel so different? Why does it feel like I am becoming someone else? For many people, this is where fear begins. They believe they are losing themselves. They believe something has gone wrong. They believe they are becoming weaker, more confused, or more broken. But what if the opposite is true? What if you are not losing yourself at all? What if Allah is rebuilding you? This is something many believers fail to recognize while they are going through it. When Allah intends to take you somewhere you have never been, He often begins by transforming who you are. Because the person you have been may not be the person you need to become. The mindset that brought you this far may not be capable of carrying you further. The habits that once served you may now be limiting you. The identity you built around worldly things may be preventing you from discovering who you truly are. And so Allah begins a process of rebuilding. The problem is that rebuilding rarely feels comfortable. Imagine an old building that has become weak over time. From the outside, it may still look fine. People may walk past it every day without noticing any problems. But the architect knows the truth. The foundation is no longer strong enough. The structure cannot safely support what needs to be built next. If something greater is going to stand in its place, parts of the old structure must first come down. The noise will be uncomfortable. The process will look messy. To an outside observer, it may even appear as if the building is being destroyed. But the architect knows something they do not. The destruction is not the goal. The rebuilding is. In many ways, Allah works with our hearts the same way. Sometimes He allows parts of our old identity to crumble, not because He wants to destroy us, but because He wants to build something stronger. Think about the person you were 5 years ago. Think about the things that mattered to you. Think about the fears you carried. Think about the priorities that controlled your decisions. Many of those things have already changed. Why? Because growth requires change. No one remains exactly the same forever. But spiritual growth creates a deeper kind of change. It changes how you think. It changes what you value. It changes what you pursue. It changes how you define success. It changes what gives you peace. And when those changes begin happening, it can feel unsettling. Because every transformation includes a period where the old version of you is fading, while the new version has not fully emerged. This is the space where many people become discouraged. They compare themselves to who they used to be. They notice what they have lost. They notice what feels unfamiliar. They focus on the discomfort of change rather than the purpose behind it. But Allah is often doing His greatest work during these hidden seasons. The believer who once depended entirely on people's approval begins learning to depend on Allah. The believer who once chased status begins seeking sincerity. The believer who once found identity in worldly achievements begins finding identity in faith. These changes are not signs of loss. They are signs of growth. Yet growth often feels like loss while it is happening. A child may feel they are losing something when they outgrow old clothes. In reality, they are growing. A student may feel they are losing comfort when facing difficult lessons. In reality, they are developing knowledge. And a believer may feel they are losing themselves when Allah begins changing their heart. In reality, they are becoming who they were always meant to be. One reason this process feels so difficult is because human beings become attached to familiarity. Even when something is unhealthy, we often prefer it because it is familiar. We know how to navigate it. We know what to expect. We know who we are within it. But Allah sometimes calls us beyond what is familiar. He invites us into a deeper level of faith. He invites us into greater trust. He invites us into a stronger relationship with Him. And to answer that invitation, we must be willing to let go of versions of ourselves that no longer serve our growth. This does not mean becoming someone completely different overnight. It means allowing Allah to refine you, to remove what is harmful, to strengthen what is weak, to heal what is wounded, to develop qualities that bring you closer to Him. Think about how gold is purified. Gold does not become pure by avoiding heat. It becomes pure by passing through it. The fire removes impurities that would otherwise remain hidden. The process is intense, but the result is valuable. In a similar way, Allah sometimes allows believers to pass through difficult seasons because those seasons reveal what needs to change. They reveal hidden fears, they reveal unhealthy attachments, they reveal misplaced priorities. They reveal areas where faith needs to become stronger. Without those challenges, many of those issues would remain buried beneath the surface. But through the process, Allah brings them into the light, not to shame you, not to punish you, but to heal you. Healing often begins with awareness, and awareness often begins with discomfort. That is why some of the greatest transformations happen during seasons that feel confusing. You may not see the progress immediately. You may not recognize who you are becoming. You may even wonder whether anything good is happening at all. But beneath the surface, Allah is working. He is shaping your character. He is strengthening your faith. He is teaching you lessons that comfort could never teach. He is preparing you for responsibilities you cannot yet see. And perhaps most importantly, He is teaching you that your true identity is not found in worldly titles, achievements, relationships, or possessions. Your true identity is found in your relationship with Him. Everything else can change. People can leave. Success can come and go. Circumstances can shift overnight. But your connection with Allah remains the foundation that cannot be shaken. The more you understand this truth, the less afraid you become of change. Because you realize that even when everything else feels uncertain, Allah remains constant. And if Allah is guiding the process, then there is wisdom behind every step. So if you feel different lately, do not immediately assume that you are losing yourself. If your priorities are changing, do not assume something is wrong. If old desires are fading and new questions are emerging, do not rush to fear. Instead, consider the possibility that Allah is doing exactly what you once prayed for. Perhaps He is answering prayers for growth. Perhaps He is answering prayers for guidance. Perhaps He is answering prayers for a stronger faith. Not by changing your circumstances first, but by changing you. Because before Allah transforms your future, He often transforms your heart. Before He elevates your life, He elevates your understanding. Before He opens new doors, He prepares the person who will walk through them. And while that preparation may sometimes feel like losing yourself, the reality is far more beautiful. You are not losing yourself. You are leaving behind versions of yourself that were never meant to be permanent. And through every challenge, every question, every uncomfortable season, Allah is carefully rebuilding you into someone stronger, wiser, closer to Him, and more prepared for the future He has already written for you. The new direction Allah is preparing you for right now. After every season of confusion, there comes a moment when a believer begins to understand something powerful. The discomfort had a purpose. The uncertainty had a purpose. The delays had a purpose. The losses had a purpose. The changes had a purpose. Nothing was random. Nothing was wasted. Nothing happened outside the knowledge of Allah. For a long time, you may have been focused on what was leaving your life. You may have spent months wondering why certain doors closed. You may have questioned why certain people disappeared. You may have struggled to understand why things that once felt meaningful suddenly felt empty. But now it is time to ask a different question. What if Allah was not simply taking you away from something? What if He was leading you towards something? This is the part many people fail to see. When Allah changes your direction, your attention naturally focuses on what is behind you. You notice the things that are ending. You notice the opportunities you lost. You notice the relationships that changed. You notice the plans that did not work out. What you often fail to notice is what Allah is preparing ahead of you. Because preparation usually happens before revelation. Allah often works behind the scenes long before you can see the results. Think about a farmer planting seeds beneath the ground. For a long period, nothing appears to be happening. The surface looks empty. There is no visible evidence of growth. If someone judged only by what they could see, they might assume nothing is taking place. But underneath the soil, a process has already begun. Roots are forming. Growth is happening. Preparation is taking place. And when the time is right, what was hidden becomes visible. Many believers experience something similar. You may feel like nothing is happening. You may feel stuck. You may feel as though your life has entered a waiting period. But just because you cannot see movement does not mean Allah has stopped working. In fact, some of His greatest work happens when you cannot see it. This is one of the reasons faith is so important. Faith allows you to trust the process before the results appear. Anyone can believe after the blessing arrives. The believer learns to trust before it arrives. The believer learns to trust that Allah is arranging things even when there is no visible evidence. The believer learns to trust that delays can contain mercy. The believer learns to trust that unanswered questions do not mean unanswered prayers. Many people imagine that divine guidance always arrives in dramatic ways. They expect a clear sign, a clear answer, a clear direction. Sometimes Allah guides in that way, but often His guidance is much quieter. Sometimes guidance comes through a growing discomfort with your old life. Sometimes guidance comes through closed doors. Sometimes guidance comes through opportunities you never expected. Sometimes guidance comes through challenges that force you to grow. And sometimes guidance comes through a season where Allah slowly changes your heart until you naturally begin walking toward a new destination. That process can feel slow. It can feel frustrating. It can feel uncertain. But when you look back later, you realize that every step was leading somewhere meaningful. One of the greatest traps people fall into is constantly looking backward. They spend so much time mourning what was that they miss what is coming. They become attached to old chapters, old dreams, old identities, old expectations. And because of that, they struggle to recognize the new path Allah is opening. But imagine trying to drive forward while staring only into the rearview mirror. Eventually, you will miss what is directly in front of you. The same thing happens spiritually. As long as your heart remains trapped in what has ended, it becomes difficult to embrace what Allah is preparing next. This does not mean you forget the past. It does not mean you pretend the losses never happened. It simply means you stop allowing the past to define your future. You begin trusting that Allah's plan is bigger than your disappointment. You begin trusting that His wisdom is greater than your understanding. You begin trusting that every closed door is creating space for the right door. This trust becomes especially important because the future Allah is preparing may not look exactly how you imagined. Many people assume Allah's blessings will arrive in the form they personally prefer, but Allah sees what we cannot. Sometimes the blessing you want is too small compared to what Allah intends to give. Sometimes the dream you are desperately holding on to would actually limit your growth. Sometimes the path you are fighting for would keep you from discovering something better. And because Allah knows the full picture, He guides differently than we would guide ourselves. At first, this can be difficult to accept. We naturally want control. We naturally want certainty. We naturally want our plans to succeed. But faith requires something deeper. Faith requires believing that Allah's wisdom is greater than our preferences. Faith requires believing that His vision is broader than ours. Faith requires believing that even when we do not understand His decisions, they are still rooted in mercy. The believer who learns this lesson gains a different kind of peace. Not peace because every problem disappears. Not peace because every question is answered. But peace because they trust the one who controls every outcome. That peace becomes a source of strength. It allows you to keep moving forward when the road is unclear. It allows you to remain hopeful during delays. It allows you to continue praying even when answers seem distant. It allows you to believe that Allah is preparing something meaningful even when you cannot yet see it. And perhaps this is exactly where you are right now. Perhaps you are standing between an old chapter and a new one. Perhaps you can feel that something is changing, but you cannot fully explain what it is. Perhaps you know that your old life no longer fits, but the next step remains unclear. If that is true, then remember this. You do not need to see the entire path to trust the one guiding it. You do not need to understand every detail to believe that Allah is working. You do not need immediate answers to know that His plan is unfolding. Your responsibility is not to control the future. Your responsibility is to trust Allah, continue moving forward, and remain sincere in your efforts. The rest belongs to Him. One day the confusion will make sense. One day the delays will make sense. One day the closed doors will make sense. One day the pain will make sense. And when that day comes, you may discover that the season you once feared was actually leading you toward one of the greatest blessings of your life. Because Allah was never trying to leave you lost. He was never trying to leave you behind. He was never trying to punish you through uncertainty. He was preparing you, preparing your heart, preparing your faith, preparing your character, preparing your future, preparing a direction that you could not yet see. And perhaps the reason nothing feels normal anymore is because Allah is gently leading you toward a life that no longer resembles the person you used to be. A life that brings you closer to Him. A life that strengthens your faith. A life that fulfills a purpose greater than your own plans. So do not fear the change. Do not fear the uncertainty. Do not fear the unfamiliar road ahead. Because the same Allah who guided you through every chapter behind you is already waiting for you in the chapter ahead. And the new direction He is preparing for you right now may be far more beautiful than anything you have left behind. Maybe nothing feels normal anymore because Allah is preparing a life that no longer fits the person you used to be. So do not fear the closed doors. Do not fear the confusion. Do not fear the change. Trust Allah. The one who is changing your direction is the same one who knows your destination. If this reminder reached your heart, comment, "I trust Allah's plan."